Good morning. My name is Madelyn Hammond, and otherwise known as Hollywood's Job Whisperer. When I wrote 27 Tips to Rock That Resume, kind of a do-it-yourself guide to help people as they're starting to get jobs. Super excited to have our guest, Regina Lark, who is an organization and productivity specialist. She's more than just, helping people organize a closet. She actually gets in there to the root cause that may be behind it. She's board certified in productivity and organization, also ADHD and chronic disorders, chronic disorganization and hoarding disorders. That's a mouthful. And last but not least, she's written a book, which I love this title. It's called Psychic Debris, Crowded Closets, the relationship between the stuff in your head and what's under your bed. I hope I got all of that right, Regina.
All
so
words
welcome.
in perfect order. Yep.
Oh, well, thank you. I wanted to just jump into it and ask you about the science behind all of this. For a while now, I've been advising clients when they're in between jobs or they're feeling particularly under stress or maybe a little bit out of sorts, waiting for that phone call, from whatever recruiter or HR person. And I try to get them out of their own head. And I said, go clean a closet or go under the bathroom sink. Or if they really are out of sorts, I send them to the garage, which is the big daddy of it all. You tell us, why does this work and what's the science behind it all?
Well, Madelyn, thank you first for inviting me to be here today. And honestly, here's what I understand about the science of it. I'm not a brain scientist, but I read a lot on the brain. And when we are engaged in a task that uplifts and elevates us, our brain is just firing on all systems, and it provides a sense of accomplishment. It provides a sense of doing something really good for ourselves, and it feels good. It gets our endorphins going, and we're engaged, and we're seeing a result. And one thing about decluttering, if this is something you have skills with, you often can see a pretty satisfying result right away. What I notice is that a lot of people with a lot of clutter have a hard time even getting started, let alone getting to the end to see how good it looks. Answers.
That's a good point, especially during this pandemic. Myself, I went on immediately a cleaning binge. It made me feel good. It made me feel like even though I couldn't control the external world around me, and it was very scary and unsettling, I felt like if I could just control this one little corner of the world, meaning my house or, my closet, it made me feel like I was in control. It's kind of a trick in your brain, I guess, or something.
Sure.
But then other people are not like that. And other people, including sometimes close family members, are the opposite. So they want their stuff around them during times of stress and fear. Do you notice that people are very different? Either they love to clean and get rid of it, or it's during scary times, they just want to just have it all around them.
Here's what I understand about folks who believe they have a lot of stuff. And it's not me to decide if it's too much stuff, just a lot of things around them. There's two types of folks, I guess. There are people who have a hoarding disorder. According to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, hoarding is a type of mental illness. And people with a hoarding disorder, the brain construct is very different, as you can imagine, from people who don't have a hoarding disorder. And I wouldn't say that somebody with a hoarding disorder likes having everything around them. We see a lot of spaces where it looks like there's nesting going on. That the spaces where they spend person with a hoarding disorder spends a lot of time, whether in a chair or a bed or someplace, that there's so many things around them. It seems very insulated and
Mm.
and secure on some level, although depending on the height, it can fall right down on their head. But the idea of liking it versus not liking it, the brain doesn't differentiate like that, as far as I know, with people who hoard. Most of my clients are chronically disorganized, and they're chronically disorganized because there are brain-based issues. Yes, hoarding, I don't want to get into the weeds here, but people with a hoarding disorder are chronically disorganized, but not all chronically disorganized people by far have a hoarding disorder. And so when I see people with a lot of clutter, there's an acceptance of it, because often folks try hard over many years, over a long period of time, to try to relieve themselves of the burden of clutter. Because they're not skilled in that, the clutter remains. And so I don't know if it's a question of liking it. I think more it's a question of accepting it, because there doesn't seem to be any alternative.
Well, along those lines, let me then ask you this as a follow-up. So decluttering, again, in my opinion, comes in different forms. And you have the physical cleaning of out a closet. But during this time where people might have a little more extra time, what would you think about decluttering, for example? Let's take it in a few other areas, like social media. Would you recommend, and not in a bad way, but maybe it's a good time to look at, all your friends on Facebook, and maybe, because you just accumulate them through the years and accept people and things change, and maybe it's a good time to unfriend people, again, not in a bad way. And
we accept these requests. We look to see maybe where we have common interest or common people. And for a long time, I just accepted everybody. And now I unfollow and unfriend anybody because these are my social media pages. And so where I spend more time on social media than not is on Facebook. And so not unlike how I operate here at home with stuff, there's always a bag next to my front door for donations. So it's not unlike how I operate online as I operate at home. I could be in my clothing closet and I see a shirt that if I've taken it off the hanger and tried it on and put it back on the hanger more than a couple of times, personally, it's going to go in the donation bag. And it's the same thing online. If I see someone's comments that seem to be negative Nelly or, Debbie Downer and wearing me down, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Also, I no longer accept friend requests from people who our people in common, when we have folks in common, if they are merely colleagues, people I friended, I accepted friendship, I won't take them.
Smart.
I just don't want, I'd rather have my feed with people that I know and enjoy and like, and I appreciate the types of things that they write. But I often get requests from folks who are acquainted with people on my feed, but they're actually not friends of mine either, although they're friends.
Right. I think that's good. I mean, you have to think of your social media as your own individual party. And would you invite these people to your party? No. And also the news that comes through these social media is obviously a consequence of who we're affiliated with, if you will. So talk to us about, because I have a lot of pictures going back a lot of years. And I wanted to organize these pictures and didn't quite know how to start. And every time any advice for us to clean up our photos and so we can enjoy them?
Yeah, photos like paper, tedious, mind-numbing, boring, tedious, mind-numbing, boring, and repetitive and frustrating, and not unless one is very creative and likes to manipulate photos and create albums. I am not that person. It's very hard to go through photos. And so like any project, get it on the calendar, give yourself the time, come up with a strategy for everything from what's the purpose of decluttering of the photo project, what's the plan, what you want the outcome to be, how much time are you willing to devote, if you are going to do your own photo project, because there are a number of very, very good photo organizers that I can recommend to you all around the country. It's spending the time. My sister and I, my older sister and I, we decluttered my mom's photos. We spent the entire day with her last year, and it was fun because my mom got to tell a lot of stories about the people in the pictures, and it was a really wonderful day. I loved it, hanging out with my sister and my mom. And what we did was, as we were going through them, my sister and I summarily discarded every rock, tree, house, groupings of people that my mother was not able to identify. All of those got tossed. We flipped through them and tossed those. And then we ended up with a giant trash, your garbage, kitchen garbage bags, the white ones, filled with pictures. And then we left my mom's, and then my sister came over to my house, and we laid out 3 giant bowls on my coffee table. And we dumped the bag, and we started flipping pictures into the bowls, mom and her people, dad and his people, and the family. And then we took and then we discarded more because we found some duplicates. And then we just took each bowl of photos, stuffed them into a gallon-size baggie, brought them to Costco, and just had beautiful CDs made. And we were not wedded to the order of the pictures. We just have, I think we came up with 3 CDs. And we've given them as gifts to different family members who had, major anniversaries and birthdays last year. But again, do it with a friend. Get ready to listen to some stories.
What's the best way to declutter old work files? I mean, it's probably the hardest thing for me, Regina, to get rid of is work files and binders and things like that. It's almost like if I get rid of them, it almost is, it somehow in my head, it's like, well, then I know I didn't work on that project. I need that to show all that hard work I put into it. I don't know. Have you come across clients that have a hard time getting rid of old trades or magazines or, work-related files and photos? I mean.
Yeah, and that I think that's very common. And I think it's common for a variety of reasons. The common part is the pain of letting go. And what I've seen, and I've worked with hundreds of people, I've been doing this a long time, and what I see is that our stuff isn't merely our stuff. It is a understanding of how we view our lives. And it's the stories that we have told ourselves about the significance or value of this thing, or the stories that other people have told us about the significance or value of the thing. So for example, quite often I will come across grandma's platters from the old country. And it's there's significance and value. Part of the family story, how the platters got here. And so it's the same thing with our own personal working lives. What were the challenges that brought us to that? And how long did it take us to work on this project? Who was I in the company when I was wearing these power suits? Who was I in the company when I created these projects or proposals? And the defining word here for me is the word was. Who was I versus what is the work that I did 10 years ago? How did that work influence me now? Because I'm still that same person. I just have moved from being engaged in that material, and now I'm working in some other area. What I had to do is I had to close the chapter on one story. Regina, graduate student,
right,
professor, and then just open the next chapter. I didn't finish what I was doing from the past.
Very valuable, especially as people who are interested in reinventing and pivoting and switching possibly to a new career. I think what you said is very valuable in terms of superfluous identities and shedding that and knowing if you get rid of one identity, it doesn't negate that you ever did it. It simply it contributed to where you are today.
But I want to follow with this other thought is everything I've done in my past, I brought with me to right here, right now. I mean, my doctoral research, I interviewed elderly Japanese women who married American soldiers. Well, I do a lot of work with older adults now. My PhD now stands for piled higher and deeper. So it's however I fashioned who I presented 10 and 20 years ago, I have just fashioned a new identity now, but I've taken all of it with me.
I want to kind of carry this theme, if we can, into a slightly different area, and that's about organization and to-do lists. I have, I'm a big list person because I like to be organized, and I have just my own crazy way of doing it. And I know a friend, very dear friend, who really had this chronic to-do list thing, almost like a compulsion. Every night he would redo the list from scratch. And I wondered, I don't know if, people watching this share this and if it's a problem for them, or do you have thoughts on this? And how do you know when the to-do lists become overwhelming?
I see a lot of to-do lists. I worked with somebody for a long time who had boxes of to-do lists. And many of the items on the lists were repeated on other lists. I think we increase the likelihood that our to-dos will go to done is if we can attach a date or a time value to the item. I would also keep it really limited. Stephen Covey, who was the guru of all things time management, had created a matrix, and the Covey matrix can be it's easily Googleable, and it's a graph to help you prioritize. And you've probably seen this, and you may have, on the job, you may have had some training in this, but it's urgent, important, urgent, not important, not important, not urgent. You're the one who determines what's urgent, not urgent, important, not important. But what I'd like to suggest is this: add 1 or 2 tasks to each quadrant, if this is what you're going to do that day. And the thing you really, really, really want to make sure you accomplish, that task goes into the urgent, important quadrant. We tend to overpopulate our to-do lists. And I think we have better success if we limit the amount of items on the list. Look, as far as we know, we have a whole lifetime to complete all of these tasks. So keep it simple. I do want to say one other thing about that is if you do have a time value on a task and you're finding that you're not getting to it, chances are pretty good you'll need some remedial work in developing a better relationship with time. What I've noticed is that people with a lot of clutter or not activating their to-dos, it's often a result of time mismanagement and or emotional mismanagement. And those are 2 big topics, but worthy of consideration as you are moving forward in your own declutter tasks.
Well, I love that about the prioritization, because I had it based on project. And so oftentimes I would find I would do the not urgent, not important, because it made me feel good just to cross off something. So I was spending time doing the most menial things and avoiding the urgent, important things. So I love that. That was great. Before we go, I'd like to ask you two quick things. One is, since many of us are quarantined with family members and or others in our lives, friends, spouses, kids, you name it, what advice do you have to help them? Because I know sometimes people resent you if you're like, let's clean up your room, or it's time to do whatever. And I've had this experience in my own life with my husband where the first time we were quarantined, I started giving him my to-do list of what I thought he should do. You should clean your office. You should clean your bookcase. You should clean your this. You should clean your that. You should wash your car. And of course, all of this was met with like, really? Go away. So obviously I didn't handle that quite right. And I wondered if you could just spend a minute telling us how we could be more beneficial and help those around us closest to us through this without them hating and resenting us for suggesting it.
Okay, that's a very good question, and I'm getting that a lot right now. I've been very curious about this social experiment that we call the shutdown, and I'm dying to read these sociological and anthropological reports and psychological reports on the other side of how this was happening in families. But this is what I have observed. It appeared that there was a lot of time now to declutter. And what I think happened is that people who did not activate on their declutter projects during the shutdown are beginning to recognize maybe it wasn't a time issue.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe there are deeper underlying issues that really need to be addressed. And so my best advice is to proceed with care and love and caution, and ask the person who you think needs the help to what kind of help do they think they need and how you can be supportive. And if answers aren't forthcoming, close the door. And I mean, you can't, I get calls, even pre-COVID, I would get a call from a daughter who was talking about her older adult mom who had a lot of clutter. And I said, well, is she in danger of a trip and fall? No. Well, is there a possibility of a pile of stuff falling on her head? No. And okay, what's your interest in this?
Right.
So you can't force somebody to do this. And the lockdown seems to have given us time, but it could be more emotional mismanagement than a time management issue. And it's probably both.
Regina, before we go, can I just ask one last thing? And that is, you had talked about time management and prioritization. And I wondered if somebody was interested in more information on that. Is there a resource that you suggest? I mean, I know you mentioned Stephen Covey, but I think that this is something that's going to resonate with a lot of people. And I just wondered if there was a particular blog or website or something, or if people had additional questions, they could contact you about this. Tell us.
Yeah, they can for sure contact me. Where I get a lot of my information on this relationship, I do a ton of reading on ADHD and ADHD behaviors and conditions. And ADHD engenders ADHD should be called executive function dysfunction. The executive function part of our brain is linear sequencing, planning, processing, time management, emotional management, going from A to B to C. To do becomes to done. Our executive function allows us to operate in that way. And when we're dealing with depression, anxiety, ADHD, health, bipolar disorder, chemo brain, a lot of medications, lousy sleep, not enough food, all of these will have an impact on the executive function. Time management and emotional management are big components of our executive function. Gets us to places on time, it keeps us emotionally managed. So if these two concepts of relationship with time, a relationship with emotions resonate for you, then I would look at books on ADHD. One of my great colleagues, Judith Kohlberg, she's got a great book. She just had a new volume come out, new edition in 2018, and it's ADD Friendly Ways of Organizing, and she writes it with a psychologist, Dr. Nadeau, and it's called the Red Book because the cover is red. But that's a very, very good place to start looking at this in terms of how to manage yourself and get things done.
Oh, this is great. Well, Regina, thank you so much for being with us.
You,
We can just talk forever on this.